We're going to continue here talking about the Psalms, starting with Psalm 96. Worship in the splendor of holiness. O sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods, for all the gods of the peoples are worthless idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord glory due to his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Yes, the world is established. It shall never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea soar, and all that fills it. Let the field exult, and everything in it. Then shall all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness, and the people in his faithfulness. And so this is a psalm that is not, well, perhaps I should say this psalm is one that we see often. It's a pattern that repeats itself. And this pattern in the Psalms is one of a return to praise and return to prayer. It's a reorientation of the mind. And I think these are necessary for just that purpose, for reorienting the mind. I think it serves to provide us a foundation, a fertile substrate for which we can appreciate the higher wisdom that other psalms provide us. The psalm is practical understanding. That is, we put these things into practice when we read the psalm and we reflect on it. And so we have these actions here, the words that recommend action, I should say. O sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name, tell of his salvation from day to day. And so as we do these things, we have to remind ourselves, what is it for us to tell of his salvation? And so we return to simple principles. We return to the question, what is salvation? Salvation is a lofty word because it is the unification of many different words, in my opinion. If we were to look up a dictionary definition, it would say to us, preservation or deliverance from harm, ruin, or loss. Another dictionary definition from the Christian worldview would be deliverance from sin and its consequences, believed by Christians to be brought about by faith in Christ. Now these are both correct, but there's a layer beneath. So this deliverance from harm, this deliverance from sin, why? Deliverance from its consequences. What are its consequences? And in here, in this realm, with an understanding the consequences, an understanding where and the direction to which we are to be delivered to is fundamental. So we are to be delivered away from sin and towards virtue, towards high ethical standing. And we are to be delivered from sin and its consequences. Its consequences, of course, I think in the most fundamental sense, means the possible destruction of the life of man in its fullest extent. Because to sin is to move away from the source of intelligibility, the source of truth, the source of virtue and morality. And without the source, the human being and the human mind is left at such an inferior state that he is open to predation to all sorts of different, we could say, spirits. We can see base tendencies. We can say base desires. One might, in absence of proper direction, pursue their sexual impulses. They may feel that domination over others is the way to live a good life through the pure pursuit of power. Others may think that freedom from suffering, the liberation from suffering, the liberation of the constraints on the self, are the way to live a good life. But of course these are all sins. And there are sophisticated ways of understanding the direction that man should walk. And there are methods by which we engage in to ensure that we are more likely, the probability increases, that we are to be saved, or to be, or we are to understand God's salvation. And so I hope this makes some sort of sense. Because if we refer now back to Psalm 96 and this process, this practice of singing, it serves as a reminder, again, that we don't forget, but it also puts it into a state of being, a state of practice and action that we enact out into the world, a sort of play in which we participate in this process. And as we do so, it unfolds this idea of salvation more deeply to us, rather than just purely explore it in the abstract sense. And so in verse 6 we see splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. We can also say are in his house, this place of divine security, divine rest, divine meaning. Because what is a home without meaning? What is a home without our belongings? What is a home without belonging itself? And of course we can increase the heavenly principle of the home by bringing into it love, by bringing into it productive relationships, family, children. And so we see strength and beauty in God's sanctuary. And so strength, this productive capacity this presence, capable presence, the ability to move, the ability to act, and to execute on a plan. These are qualities of strength. The ability to remain steadfast in the face of adversity. This is strength. And on the other hand, we have beauty. Beauty is something that we not only feel, but we participate in it in some sense. Just as we look at a painting, and just as we fall into love, just as we maintain the love that binds our relationships together, beauty is this sort of color. It is the very thing that gives us reason. That is to say, it increases the likelihood of the human mind expending its attentive capacity on something. It increases its salience. It draws our attention from the multitude of things that it could possibly pay attention to in the environment, and it centralizes it onto something beautiful. Now, of course, within beauty, there is danger. Just as there is danger within good. Because although we may recognize that there is some highest form of beauty, highest form of good, the human being, I think, always is at risk of falling away from it and pursuing something that's akin to a delusion, that the human mind finds something beautiful that is inherently sinful. The human mind may find something that is good, that they may feel is good, and they may think that they have perfect reason to believe that it is good. But in reality, it is destructive. And so we sort of have a confusion in terms here, because in some sense, it wouldn't be right to call a misplaced good a good. But if a person believes that the action that they are performing is good, for there aren't many people that can sustain their lives under the false pretense of performing a good, but really understanding and believing that they are performing evil. If one is to perform evil, I think it stands to reason that they believe that the evil that they are performing, even if it's counter to the culture and to the society, they inherently believe at some level that it is a good. And so when we say a misplaced good, this misplaced good it gives a certain homage to the individual that misplaces the righteous good, that understands that all of us are faulty. And so, and moreover than that, it's a recognition that we are faulty, but also that we all desire to pursue good. And we do so, again, this refers to beauty. It refers to something that is salient. It refers to something that gives us a sense, a greater sense. Now, this greater sense, like I have described here previously, can be dangerous. Because there are no shortage of things that can give us a greater sense in life. And there are no shortage of pursuits. I think of polytheism here. They could be quite lofty pursuits that have very strong reason. But if we forget the entirety of this picture, of what the reality of this picture is, that is that all things tend towards this unity. If we forget it, that we are bound to believe with our fullest of faith and place value and place the very thing that drives the human mind, the sense of purpose and meaning, into values that are inferior. And these inferior values are not suitable to sustain the human mind long term. And they lead to pathology. They can lead to psychopathology. They can lead to bodily pathology. In the case of the obese person, continually eating and eating to satisfy the self-desire, while they may convince themselves, because they've worked all day, that they deserve some treat, some present. All the while, this reward that they give themselves is much greater than the sacrifice that they had put forth in the first place. And the result is the deterioration and the decline in health of the body. So to return to this point of the sense, the elevated sense in terms of the good, in terms of the beautiful, we have to remember that when we praise God, we praise the highest unity of these ideas. And it is within our responsibility of the faithful people to determine what that is. And if we run continually into roadblocks, then this is God's way of telling us that we are not performing, that we are not acting, that we are not walking in the righteous path. We are not walking upright. And the unfortunate thing is, for many of us, for myself, some of these behaviors, some of these actions can go on for many years before they are noticed. And when they are noticed in the most severe and harshest consequences that to other people might seem strange, but within the mind, it becomes a prison. It becomes a sentence, a confinement that we can't break out of. Whereas, to view it from the outside, we are free individuals. I am a free individual. But within this mistake and the sin against the divine, we will find ourselves in prison no less. That we can find ourselves in a secular prison for breaking secular law. So we worship the Lord in the splendor of holiness. We tremble before Him and all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Yes, the world is established. It will never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. So no one is free of this divine judgment. And this world that is inhabited now by the conscious mind of man cannot be undone. We are here, and we have gained this conscious mind. Whatever the material explanation is for the formation of this mind, it does not matter. The fact of the matter is the mind is here now. And this world that is created because of it cannot be moved. Psalm 97, the Lord reigns. The Lord reigns, let the earth rejoice. Let the many coastlands be glad. Clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. Fire goes before him and burns up his adversaries all around. His lightnings light up the world. The earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord of all the earth. The heavens proclaim his righteousness, and all the people see his glory. All the worshippers of images are put to shame, who make their boast in worthless idols. Worship him, all you gods. Zion hears and is glad, and the daughters of Judah rejoice, because of your judgments, O Lord. For you, O Lord, are most high over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. O you who love the Lord, hate evil. He preserves the lives of his saints. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked. Light is sown for the righteous, and joy for the upright in heart. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, and give thanks to his holy name. And so this is a similar psalm here. The psalm of remembrance, the psalm of orientation, of directing one's attention. And so it begins, the Lord reigns, let the earth rejoice, let many coastlands be glad. And why should we be glad because of this? We should be glad because we have something. I know it's repetitive, but we have something to point to. We have something to ground us. We have something to alleviate our suffering. We have something to guide us in this path of existence. Guide us up the ladder to heaven, whatever that might look like. Verse 2, clouds and thick darkness are all around him. And this is a symbol, I think, of the intelligible meeting the unintelligible, or the known meeting the unknown, the light meeting the darkness. And within God, that is surrounded by these clouds and darkness, we have the sense of it all. We have the point of it. We have the meaning. We have the purpose and the direction. Again, with this repetition. But the psalm points at very similar things as the previous psalm. And not just the previous psalm, but many before it. And through this repetition, I think we come to a greater degree, a better understanding of exactly what this direction is, and of exactly what the divine is. For in the next line here, righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. In the last episode, or the last two perhaps, we've seen just this same language of righteousness and of justice. And so we see here a matter of principle. If we are to say that one is to be righteous or one is to be just, then one must live by certain concrete and known principles. And these principles are held firm. And I would say that just as in our previous verbal wanderings of the Psalm 96, the seed that we plant, the very principles by which we live our lives, the very pursuit of this presents to us a unique danger. Because the deeper we plant the seed, the more foundational it becomes. And so if it is the case that man, by his fallen nature, is to attempt a good, but to plant a poor seed, He will, in the future, regardless of his intention, but let's say, like I've mentioned, that this is a good intention, the future will yield this divine judgment, whether that be in generations or in a matter of days. And it's this danger that I think lies in an unfortunate condition of man, because even, like I said, even if we do choose to do good, there's a possibility of being convicted of an injustice, a crime against the divine order of things. But what we have faith in is a forgiving God, a God that understands, a God that has created the condition of man. And within this very condition, within the very fallen condition, we will be forgiven as long as we continue to seek this salvation, this righteousness, and this justice that is the foundation of God's throne. And so we see this imagery in the following verses. Fire goes out before him and burns up all his adversaries all around. And of course, the adversary to God is not quite what we were talking about, but certainly the fire that goes before him, that burns up the adversary in the moment. The possibility that the individual that wishes to pursue good in that moment plants a false seed, and in that moment becomes an adversary, then the fire comes in. It goes out before God. And within this fire lies a period of destruction, but also a time of rejuvenation and of change and of transformation that transforms this adversary through grace into one that understands the mistakes that they made and replants the seed, a higher seed, a seed that is longer lasting, that is more resistant to disease and to predation. His lightnings light up the world. The earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord of all the earth. And so these lightnings, this brief, violent moment of illumination of the dark surround, this instant of knowledge and wisdom, this instant of learning of one's mistakes. In my mind, this causes me to be fearful. If there was something that I believed in so wholeheartedly that in an instant, like the flash of lightning, I knew differently, this is something that I think would produce fear. However, I think at this point, I understand that, well, maybe that's a bit hubristic, because I was about to say that at this point I understand that this can happen to me. It's already happened before. It's happened in such a way that nearly broke me. And after that experience, I imagine that when I face this lightning again, it's not as though I'll be free of the consequences, but I'll be ready to accept this experience and this nature, because I know that the only person to blame for its effect on me is myself. So this lightning lights up the world, which is the world of man, the conscious mind. And the earth sees and trembles, because now this spark of wisdom within the conscious mind creates a new drive, a new purpose to manipulate the earth, to raise it towards whatever wisdom that flashed before them within this flash of lightning. The mountains, this symbol of strength, this seemingly immovable object, they melt like wax before the Lord. That is to say, this intense heat, fire, can make the seemingly immovable reduce into a state of confusion. It can reduce it into a state of humility. The heavens have proclaimed his righteousness, and all the peoples see his glory. All the worshippers of images are put to shame, who make their boasts in worthless idols. Worship him, all you gods. And so this is the idea that we were talking about earlier, about this idolatry and polytheistic thinking. The individuals that find themselves a bit of intelligibility somewhere out there in their life, they pursue it wholeheartedly, but they ignore the larger picture. They thirst after some inferior good. They place it in an improper manner, in an improper location, in this hierarchy of value and of virtue, of purpose and of meaning. And eventually, as they say, the chickens come home to roost. Eventually the time comes for justice. And so Zion, the city of people that are committed to God, they are glad. And the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments, O Lord. For you, O Lord, are most high over all the earth. You are exalted far above all gods. And so they rejoice because they understand that they are a city of people, a body of people that are pursuing the righteous path. And so the judgment, when it does come, assuming they are walking in the ways of the Lord, will not affect them as harshly. O you who love the Lord, hate evil. He preserves and lives the lives of his saints. And he does this because the saints are people of such a character that commit themselves to such extreme devotion that they are preserved. Their legacy outlasts their material existence. Their days in the temporary life are full of purpose and of meaning, of love, of beauty, of goodness, of happiness. Light is sown for the righteous, a joy for the upright in heart. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, and give thanks to his holy name. Psalm 98. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, a psalm. O sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have worked salvation for him. The Lord has made known his salvation. He has revealed his righteousness in the sight of other nations. He has remembered his steadfast love and faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with the lyre and the sound of melody, with the trumpets and the sound of the horn. Make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. Let the sea roar and all that fills it, the world and those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the hills sing for joy together before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with equity. And so it's another one of these psalms again. It's just hitting it over and over and over again. We sing praise to God because he has done marvelous things. God is known for his salvation, for this deliverance from sin and of evil, from deliverance from the planting of false seeds that do not yield good fruits. And so we make a joyful noise to the Lord. We sing joyous songs. We sing praises. We praise the Lord with the lyre and the sound of melody. And so here comes in beauty. And beauty is this expression of the understanding of which way we should be oriented, which way we should be looking. We give praise and we find joy in the very idea that we can find the proper seed to plant in the earth to grow our civilization. This civilization that provides us with most meaning and most purpose. Now, if I were to reflect on the current state of our civilization, it certainly could be different. And in terms of divine judgment, certainly we will have our day. There are many different areas of our society that we will feel it. Many individuals will be crushed by it. Many governments will topple because of it. But we have to hope and we have to have faith that whatever comes next, we learn from our previous mistakes, and we don't just double down on the old mistakes, because if we do so, we go the way of the Romans. We go the way of the Indus River Valley civilizations. With trumpets and the sound of the horn, make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. Let the sea roar and all that fills it, the world and those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the hills sing for joy together. And so we have a bunch of seemingly earthly symbols here. We have the sea and everything that fills it. We have the world and those who dwell in it. We have the rivers. We have the hills. And they are all doing something. The sea roars. Again, it's the light that permeates the seemingly lifeless. The world. This place within this new place inhabited by the conscious mind of man. Those who dwell in this place, let them roar. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the very thing that has the potential to provide humanity with a source of growth, a river that we can tap into, irrigate our crops, to provide us with sustenance long term, so that we may design greater and greater plans. Let the rivers clap in their hands. Let the hills sing for joy before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness, and all the peoples with equity. Psalm 99. The Lord our God is holy. The Lord reigns. Let the peoples tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim. Let the earth quake. The Lord is great in Zion. He is exalted over the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he. The King in his might loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God. Worship at his footstool. Holy is he. Moses and Aaron were among his priests. Samuel also was among those who called upon his name. They called to the Lord, and he answered him. In the pillar of the cloud he spoke to them. They kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. O Lord our God, you answered them. You were forgiving God to them, but an avenger to their wrongdoings. Exalt the Lord our God, and worship at his holy mountain, for the Lord our God is holy. So we're getting a series of these psalms here. Again, one right after the other. This hammering home of the principle that we should be praising because of what? Because it gives us the way to walk. It is the guide to the consciousness of man that finds himself, like we have said on many different episodes, the analogy to the darkened room. That is the condition of man that he finds himself in, born into this conscious mind, with this body into this reality, not knowing anything, not knowing what's around him, why it's around him. But as he moves in this space, he begins to discover things. He begins to utilize things for different purposes. But eventually he finds himself upon a structure of a different sort. The structure that seems to give the entirety of this room purpose and meaning. And he says to himself, or he finds the reason to pursue this object, to pursue this thing that provides the source and stability to everything that surrounds him, where otherwise he was gathering bits and pieces of the remainder that was the result of this source. And rather than pick up the scraps, this person in this darkened room, this person easily plagued by the existential suffering of this condition, wishes to pursue the source and to bathe in the divine. And so the Lord reigns. Let the people tremble. He sits enthroned upon the cherubim. Let the earth quake. And this cherubim is the divine entity that brings down this principle of God to man. It gives it something to hold it. The cherubim is a mediator between God and the conscious mind of man. The Lord is great in Zion. He is exalted over all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. Holy is he. The king in his might loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Now this is a massive statement, because in the Bible Jacob is known as the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. And as such, he is seen as a symbol of this grace and of faithfulness in God. And so of Jacob, we understand the formation of the promise between this person and God. He makes a covenant with him. He promises to protect him. He promises to give his descendants the land of Canaan. Now, I think that this promise, can often be misinterpreted in our day too literally. The promise of a particular land, I think, can lead to a certain type of dogmatism. This is the sort of false seed that we were talking about. But the broader point, I think, still holds. That we are promised a land if we can provide our people with the necessary binding to keep it for ourselves. And this is within the covenant. This is within the promise. This is within the idea of faithfulness. And so God's protection and his provision for Jacob, when God tells Jacob that he will watch over him and keep him safe as returned to his homeland, we see this in practice. We see this in Jacob's acknowledging that God was with him during his time away from home. We see God's guidance and direction when Jacob wrestles with the angel. He changes his name from Jacob to Israel, those who struggle with God, or he who struggles with God. And this struggle involves, I think, inherently a sense of humility. Because it is not the case that this righteous person who made the covenant with God has everything now figured out. It's not the magic pill. It is the commitment to a certain type of striving, a certain type of life. And when he wrestled with the angel, he earned his stripes. He wrestled with something that was so powerful that he was considered to be a holy man. To wrestle with such a principle so divine and so solid is no simple matter. It is a revolutionary matter. These are the types of seeds that move civilization forward. Now these seeds run their course, no doubt. At least in the temporary nature of man, they run their course. But we always return to the perennial patterns. And while the particular struggle, maybe some of the superficial details of this struggle with the angel that Jacob had, they may be different in our day, but fundamentally, when we return to this struggle, when we return to Israel, or when we become Israelites, we will again struggle in this way. We will again find this angelic wisdom for our people. And we will be led to become the father, the mothers of the future tribes of the successful people, of God's people. And lastly, I would say Jacob's experience and his son Joseph, when he is sold into slavery and falsely accused. But this Joseph, given his upbringing, given this solid principle, given this leadership by his father, rose to power in Egypt. And he saved his family during famine, propositioning the Pharaoh to open the grains, the storehouses of grain, the trade. And so this saved Israel from famine because of this divine influence, because of this spirit that inhabited the people. Probabilistic to a certain degree, no doubt, is what happens if Jacob, or what would happen if Joseph had not been sold into slavery and found himself in the position of power. Well, it would be something else. It appears to us as a miracle, or as lucky, I suppose, but all the groundwork is there. The soil is fertile for divine intervention. In the pillar of the cloud, he spoke to them. They kept his testimonies and the statute that he gave them. This is referring to Moses and Aaron and Samuel. And so this pillar is a pillar of stability. It is the way within this cloud, the spirit that carries Israel to safety, to liberation. It is their protection. O Lord our God, you answered them. You were a forgiving God to them, but an avenger of their wrongdoings. Exalt the Lord our God, and worship his holy mountain, for the Lord our God is holy. Psalm 100. His steadfast love endures forever. A psalm for giving thanks. Make a joyful noise to the Lord. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Bless his name. For the Lord is good. His steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. And so here we see the state of mind in which we should approach the Creator of all things. How we should praise the divine being. We do so with joy. We do so with gladness. We do so with singing. And in doing so, this primes the spirit. It opens one up allows one to feel connected to those around them. Know that the Lord, he is God. It is he who made us. We are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. And so this psalm is short and sweet. No leap here into profound wisdom. There is some wisdom, certainly, but It is a reminder to man to be thankful, to be joyful at what he has been given. And this steadfast love that we raise our heads towards, that we place one foot in front of the other for, this steadfast love outlasts the time of any one man. It endures forever. Psalm 101. I will walk with integrity. A psalm of David. I will sing of steadfast love and justice. To you, O Lord, I will make music. I will ponder the way that is blameless. O when will you come to me? I will walk with integrity of heart within my house. I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A perverse heart shall be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. Whoever slanders his neighbor secretly, I will destroy. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart, I will not endure. I will look with favor on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. Morning by morning I will destroy all the wicked in the land, cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. And so we begin with this title, I will walk with integrity. I will walk with honesty. I will value the truth. I will be upright in my dealings and in my pursuits. I will have strong moral principles. I will ponder the way that is blameless. Oh, when will you come to me? And it's interesting to note that everybody who reads these psalms will be doing the same exercise, the same practice of pondering the way that is blameless. Or in other words, of living, of behaving, of acting in such a way that liberates oneself from this burden that we all share, the existential question of how to live rightly and how to avoid the extreme consequences of betraying the divine way. And so I will walk with integrity of heart within my house. I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. Because something that is of worth is of value. And to put something forward in front of one's eyes that does not have value is a waste of time. But more importantly, it is a waste of the conscious mind. The conscious mind that could otherwise be oriented in a direction that is more fulfilling and meaningful, more truthful. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. Those who give in to weakness, to laziness, to gluttony, to sexual perversion, any number of these sins that we are all too familiar with, and most of us have experience with one of these vices in one form or another. And I think we all understand what it means to fall away from a state of being that is more pure, from a state of mind that allows us to feel more connected, more with it, more cognitively sharp. A perverse heart shall be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. And that is to say that when the time comes, I imagine in my mind for one to make a joke about some behavior, and the punchline of the joke really isn't a punchline per se, but it is a recognition beneath the surface that we all share this experience, that we all give in to this desire. These jokes are subtle, but often they can have great effect among those around because they all understand what it means to fall away. They all understand this perversion of heart, this failure of character. And we find it humorous because we have all given into it. But without the recognition that a perverse heart shall be far from me, and I will know nothing of evil, this joke sort of becomes a perversion in and of itself. Because the greater degree of understanding that we have in relation to this perverse behavior that makes the joke funny, the funnier it will be to us. And one, I think, that is far away from this type of thing, this type of sin. I think they may still laugh to engage with those around them, but in their heart they understand that they are free from it. And perhaps now what they are laughing at is not the identification with this perverse behavior, but rather the very idea that one would partake in this type of perverse behavior. And so it's very subtle, but it's a different perspective. And those true of heart I think can appear quite judgmental to those who are struggling, who do not know the proper way. And it's not necessarily the fault of those that are pure of heart, unless they truly are judgmental, in which case I think this heart fails in its purity. But rather this is a weakness of those that do not quite yet understand or come to know the truth, or I should say the orientation, the direction of attention that is required, again, for living the type of life that is most fulfilling, that is satisfying, that brings joy, that proliferates happiness, not only to the person within, but those from without, those that surround this person. Whoever slanders his neighbor secretly I will destroy. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart I will not endure. And so to slander somebody that is considered a neighbor is to make a false or damaging statement about somebody that is close to you. In other words, it is a liar to defame someone for one's own personal gain. And this is inherently wrong because it does not lift up the body. It attempts to keep a portion of the body down to elevate another. It's a form of disconnectedness on the part of the individual in relationship to the whole. Whoever has a haughty look, an arrogant heart, I will not endure. As for myself, I think that I am guilty at times of looking at others haughtily. That is arrogant. I can be quite proud, judgmental, looking from a place above to a place below. And when this happens, I'm beginning more and more to be able to recognize it. And to shift this mode into something that is more conducive to the uplifting spirit. But it is a fine line to be walked, because 1 millimeter in any particular direction, I imagine myself walking a tightrope across a large valley between 2 peaks. I think this is akin to the nature of the proud, the vain, and the arrogant, the conceited. Because 1 false step in one's assessment of another, or of the pattern of one's behavior, and considering it in their own context, if it is right or if it is wrong, there's a fine line to be walked. Because easily one can make a conclusion, and this conclusion props up the ego instead of learning how to temper it, learning from the mistake of another that can be used for one's own personal growth. Not in the sense of damnation for the other, for the neighbor, but rather a damnation for the part of the self that behavior is most likely bred within. And of the other, they deserve love. Ultimately, this behavior, if it is changed in the self, I think can be influenced to be changed in another. Though it may not necessarily be the responsibility of the individual that observes it to do so, especially if there is no fertile substrate of love for which one can act on to improve this condition. But at the very least, a type of engagement can take place to increase one's understanding of why another may behave in a particular way or believe a particular belief. And together they come to a sort of conclusion, a bilateral enlightenment, if you wish, when they both engage in this type of discussion, this dialogos. I will look with favor on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. So that last line, He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. I think it's important to remind ourselves what the word minister means in this context as a verb. It means to attend to the needs of another, to take care of them, to look after them. For all the good that the Psalms do, and for the wisdom that they impart, for the directionality that they provide. And though at times they do provide me with the necessary nutrition that we all desire, it's difficult at times, given the length of the Psalms, to deal with the fact that there are many claims. And it's not that these claims have a lack of proof, because I think they are grounded within patterns of experience that provide proof. Now, if you choose not to believe in the particular history, at least you can appreciate the narrative pattern and the possibility of this pattern existing. And it's only a matter of turning the eyes inwards to your own experience. You don't even have to look to the outside world, to the objective world, to understand that these patterns exist within your own mind. And then you can further the exercise by looking outward, by looking at those around you, and seeing the patterns there as well. So whether one has faith in the histories or not, it doesn't matter. But I digress. My main point is that I hunger for something more substantial, that the Psalms of the Old Testament often fall short of. And that is a sufficient unpacking the why and the what is. And it is a matter of patience. As I've said on previous episodes, the Psalms have a particular way and a particular cadence to them. It's definitely a slow march to wisdom and understanding, but you get it if you pay attention to it. But again, by the same token, when I hear, I will look with favor on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell with me, I think, who is me? I want every time that I hear this language, I want every time that God makes a reference to himself to explain it to me with such certainty and richness that I am consumed by the divine love, this steadfast love that I hear so often in the Old Testament. This love that I experience in partialities, desperately looking for some unity to unite the whole together. And I understand there are many experiences within life that provide this for us. But being as I am, how I am, and the condition of my life as it is now, I require this sort of abstract understanding. As I mature and as I age, perhaps I'll move this into something more experiential. But for now, and perhaps for all times, as learning is a commitment that has no end, there is this hunger for the who is me, not only from God, but also from my own experience. Who is me? How should I be? I'm told to walk in the path of the righteous, walk in the path of the upright, to live with virtue. Okay, I believe you. I've experienced living in a particular way, expressing certain values and certain virtues, and through this experience I understand what truth lies within it. But I require more. I require the very essence, the very principle that leads one to this uprightness, that leads one to the quick cognitive recognition of the pattern of the most principled of virtues. And from my standpoint, for all the good that the Psalms do, they do not fulfill this itch in its entirety, I would say. Nor does it have to, because it is but one book of many in the Bible. It is but one book within the tradition of Christianity. It is but one book in the thought of the human mind. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. And so it's interesting, after what I've said, I now enter into verse 7 here with something that is quite concrete. This principle of not lying. Now, this is something I can easily incorporate into my life. And that's not to say that up until this point I haven't, or that I needed to read this to understand this principle. But I need to read it, to think about it, and to further the depth of understanding of what it might mean to be a person that does not utter lies and that does not practice deceit. And so if we were to consider this, what might we say about deceit and about lying? So let's start with deceit. Deceit is a hiding, a covering, a misrepresentation of the truth. And we do so to make others believe that what we say is truthful. And within this exists the lie that props up this deceitful behavior. But why is this bad? Why is it the case that covering the truth, perhaps dressing it up in different clothing to make it appear different from its actual identity, why is this bad? Well, I would say that if truth is to be God, if God is the source of all that is, and from this source of everything that is, we choose to run around within our reality, throwing coverings over the objects, and perhaps even the motivations, the very reason why one exists. I think we risk moving away from the truth itself. That is to say, the individual that practices it eventually deludes themselves into some false purpose, some false practice that moves them away from this source of striving that leads to the fulfillment of the individual, that leads to the cohesiveness of the collective, that leads to the propagation of what we might consider to be love. And so I imagine when I wake in the morning without my glasses, I need them to see distance. I imagine this to be similar to a deceitful man. That is, one that lies is thrown into this reality that wakes up from their slumber, that comes into their consciousness from childhood. Without these glasses on their face. And as such, they cannot see the clarity that exists around them. And because of their own blindness, because of their insecurity and uncertainty and knowledge of the detailed aspects of the objects around them, they narrow themselves off. They cover things for a false purpose, so that they can be in greater control of the reality regardless of the truth. Because what they want is not the truth. What they want is power, so they can have the false security that would otherwise come from living a righteous life, an upright life. But instead they use inferior motives, again through this deceit, to cover the blurriness around them that gives them a false sense of sharpness and definition and of clarity, as if they were to wear glasses. But it's strange to me why a man would not just pursue the path of clear sight, rather than just stay in his condition with this blurred vision, and yet behave in such a way that maintains his own egotistical place in life, again his own blindness, which he can change willingly, towards the higher degree of clarity. Why he chooses this life for the other. And so when I hear verse 7, no one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house, no one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes, it seems to imply that those without clarity, or rather I should say those who choose not to pursue clarity, because there are many, I myself included, every human being, there's always something that somebody doesn't know, a certain sense of sharpness and clarity that eludes our sight. It's not necessarily in the inherent nature of man, of his fallen nature, that we should judge, because this is just how we are in relation to the divine. What we should judge, at least from our own personal perspective, unless we choose to have the divine judgment come at us in as a consequence of our judgment of others, which I suppose is fine as long as we are willing to accept it. But rather, we should focus on what we choose, because we have the free will to do so. We have the free will to decide that we want to live a life of clarity. And so we choose to walk in the path that increases our clarity. And so what does that mean? Well, I think it has something to do with what I just described about the nature of the Psalms. And the Psalms inherently are, their purpose is an orientation that says, okay, you confused and you lost man, look in that direction. Walk in that direction. It is the person on the journey, on this way, within our journey, that gives us directions. The Psalms are not our destination. But without this direction, without this man to guide us, there is no way we would end up in the dwelling place of the Lord, let's say. And so again, I return to the thought of accepting free will, accepting our choices, all the while understanding that with humility, there will always be this dullness. But it is not to shy away from the pursuit of clarity and to cover it with lies, to maintain this egotistical sense of self-control and of power over their own situation. It is again to accept the infinite clarity of all that is, which we can conceptualize within God. Morning by morning, I will destroy all the wicked in the land, cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. And so, this philosophy is quite interesting, because again, regardless of the historical context, this is a man living in that era. And he is saying, morning by morning I will destroy all the wicked in the land, cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. The ancient people were kind of intense, just to put it frankly. And it's not the case that the modern people are not intense, I suppose. But this raw experience, this raw understanding, perhaps, not everybody would agree at this type of execution of divine purpose. But nonetheless, it is interesting to reflect on this philosophy of this destruction of those wicked that surround them. It was a much different world, a much different context. Naive in a certain sense. You know, in the modern day, I think we deal, even though we are much more material and secular, we deal heavily with spirits. There's less conflict physically. But our minds and our abstraction leads us into such a whirlwind of delusion and of chasing our own tails that, you know, eventually, like, the conflicts that we would have, the magnitude and the scale of them are just so much more, are so much more devastating. Of course, partially due to the technology, but that's just the point. It is all the wisdom that we have accumulated up until now. We've experienced the man, the psalmist, on our journey. We've passed this book. We've gone into the next, gone into the next, and gone into the next. We have experienced different ages, different philosophers, different scientists. It's a whirlwind. It is like waking up after drinking too much alcohol. It gives me a headache just to think about it. And of course, upon the horizon lies something so sinister and so evil that it makes me a bit unsettled. And this evil attempts to disrupt the attentive mind. It attempts to disrupt the memory of man. It attempts to disrupt the pattern of seeing. We mentioned earlier about this example that I experience every morning, waking up without my glasses into a state of blurriness. I can't even see the clock. Once I put on my glasses, I can see them. But we talked about this purely in the sense and at the level of the individual. But this, of course, exists on a higher level. On the level of the spirit. On the level of the adolescent spirit, I think, let's say. The tyranny. The naive spirit. But nonetheless, if man is so forgetful that he loses his way to such a degree that he doesn't even remember the psalmist directing him in the right direction, let alone the rest of it, then what are we now but just cannon fodder and targets for all of our knowledge and understanding about the material world, except weaponized and turned inward in the self-destructive sense. A gun to the head, as it were. So I'll stop here. We'll begin next time with Psalm 102, titled, "Do Not Hide Your Face from Me." A prayer of one afflicted when he is faint and pours out his complaint before the Lord.